With the Ahsoka show coming out in a few days, I wanted to talk about the show, the Disney Canon book and comic tie-ins, and how things relate to the expanded universe. Make sure to stay to the end of the video for a big update on my Shadows of the Empire fan film. I'm in a unique position to discuss Ahsoka and the expanded universe because I've read all of the Timothy Zahn Star Wars books, both his Disney era and EU novels, the Ahsoka novel by E.K. Johnston, and I've read many other relevant EU and Disney Star Wars novels and comics too, in addition to watching all of the relevant movies and TV shows leading into Ahsoka. Why even talk about this? Well, it's very clear that for Ahsoka, Filoni will be taking inspiration from Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy, and Filoni has a history of taking inspiration from books, games, and comics in the past that is both relevant to Ahsoka, the EU, and the Disney canon at large. Based on the trailers and marketing materials, plus some of the reactions to the early premiere screening this past Friday, here is what I and most people probably expect season 1 of Ahsoka will be. Ahsoka will continue Ahsoka Tano's journey following her most recent appearance in the Book of Boba Fett, where she appears with Luke and Mando. Continuing her hunt for Ezra Bridger and Thrawn, Ahsoka reaches out to the Mandalorian Sabine Wren on Lothal, and together the two of them go on this adventure. On their journey, they encounter some brand new dark side Force users, Baylan and Shin, also intent on finding Thrawn. On the surface, I could actually say this sounds interesting, but there's several things that give me reason to be apprehensive about this. For one, Dave Filoni seems to be loosely inspired by Timothy Zahn's original Thrawn trilogy, the first book being titled Heir to the Empire, which Ahsoka literally says right here in the trailer.
I started hearing whispers about Thrawn's return as heir to the Empire.
Given how incredible the Thrawn trilogy is, it would be incredibly disappointing for myself and other EU fans if the adaptation was poorly done. Luke and Mara avoiding stormtroopers on the Force-dampening Ysalamari covered world of Mirkor, smooth-talking smuggler Talon Karrde and the smugglers alliance he pulls together, Han and Leia preparing to bring their twins Jacen and Jaina into the galaxy, Thrawn starting a new Clone War, Leia's adventures on Kashyyyk and the devastated world of Hanagur, the military and political struggles faced by the New Republic between Borsk Fey'lya, Admiral Akbar, Bel Iblis, and Mon Mothma, and the challenges that Luke Skywalker faces as a Jedi, encountering Jorah C'baoth and Mara Jade. These characters and events are what made those books great, and any adaptation that is missing those details will equally be missing the greatness that came with it. It seems to me that what the Filoniverse is building towards is a loose adaptation of these events. Ahsoka will take the lead Force user character spot, likely relegating Luke's role to only a cameo. Jorah C'baoth is clearly the inspiration for Baylan, with Shin being a loose replacement of Mara Jade. Instead of Han, Leia, and Chewbacca, we'll get Hera, Zeb, and Sabine. Instead of Talon Karrde, Boba Fett will probably be in the lead smuggler type position. Thrawn will still be there, and presumably Captain Pellaeon too, since he appeared in The Mandalorian Season 3. They never confirmed it or not, but I think Rook died in Star Wars Rebels, so Thrawn's Nogiri protector will likely be missing. However, Timothy Zahn did say in an interview earlier this year that the Rook in Star Wars Rebels was not the same Rook in his novels, but that Rook may have just been a title or common name among the Nogiri, so that doesn't rule out the original Rook character returning, but I doubt Filoni will flesh that out. Based on that interview, it also seems that Zahn is totally out of the loop on what is happening in Ahsoka, so it's likely that there's limited input regarding Thrawn on his part. If you want to watch the full interview, I'll put the link in the description. The first few minutes are in French, but all of Zahn's interview is in English. Now, what I'm theorizing here will probably not all be in the first season of Ahsoka. My guess is that we'll get a lot of scenes with Ahsoka, Baylan, and Shin, some battles with Thrawn and his allies against the New Republic, and maybe by the end of the first season, Ahsoka and Sabine will actually find and rescue Ezra. If that's the case, I think at least season 1 of Ahsoka might be okay. But I'm not convinced that what this show and what the rest of the Filoniverse has been building towards is something I'll be on board with. Back to the source material here for a moment. One thing that would be awesome, but I'm really doubting Dave Filoni is even aware of it, is that Captain Pellaeon and Ahsoka actually met during the Clone Wars in the expanded universe. Without wading too deeply into the TCW versus Clone Wars multimedia project debate, there was an EU novel titled No Prisoners, where Ahsoka was aboard Captain Pellaeon's ship and aids in the rescue of another major EU character, Callista, during the Clone Wars. There's actually a really funny moment in this book when Pellaeon cracks down on Ahsoka for wearing clothes that were too informal in his opinion, and despite her rank as a Jedi, she was asked to wear some additional clothing. If this book and scene are referenced in the Ahsoka show, I must say that would be very cool, but like I said, bad chance. From the trailers, it's also evident that Huyang, an Old Republic era droid who's been with the Jedi Order Order for a very long time and went through a tribulation with Ahsoka during the Clone Wars series, will also make an appearance. It's also rumored that Temuera Morrison will be reprising his role as a familiar clone, Captain Rex. It's been theorized and more or less confirmed that this guy on Endor was actually Captain Rex, and so even though he'd be an aged old geezer several years after Endor, it would make sense that Ahsoka would invite him on her adventure in some way. Something I'd be interested to see here is something resembling the Empire of the Hand as it was shown in the Hand of Thrawn duology. In the EU, while Thrawn was in exile in the Unknown Regions, he built his own empire that served the purpose to protect the Empire and Unknown Regions natives against the major outside threats like the Vagari and Yuzong Bong. Given how things in the Filoniverse have gone thus far, the best reference we'll probably get to this is some lame allusion to the First Order instead. However, staying faithful to the EU's idea on this would work out so much better in my opinion. Something that very well could come to pass in the Ahsoka show is the inclusion of Mount Tantiss on the planet Wayland. In Timothy Zahn's original Thrawn trilogy, Mount Tantiss was a massive cloning facility that the Empire had constructed in the event that he needed to make a lot of clones very fast. Mount Tantiss was full of Sparty cylinders which were able to grow fully matured clone bodies very quickly, and had a flash learning process in which a being could be cloned and their memories and knowledge copied over very quickly. This however came with a major drawback. You see, clones who were created this way were often inferior in skill and intelligence and had the unfortunate habit of going insane, unlike the Kaminoan method which took a lot longer but produced much more stable clones. Timothy Zahn also wrote a 3-part short story called The Hero of Kartau, which tells the story of how the Sparty cylinders came to Mount Tantiss. In the show The Bad Batch, we also see the presence of Mount Tantiss on Wayland, though its design and function is somewhat different than in the EU. Throughout a lot of the new Disney Plus shows, we've seen a lot of allusions to Project Necromancer, which is the program wherein Palpatine clones himself a new body and uses essence transfer to transfer his essence into this new body. This is difficult because clone bodies do not exhibit the same aptitude for connecting with the Force as the original body, and Palpatine wanting to become immortal would only be able to do this once, and then would live out the rest of his life without access to the Force. Project Necromancer seeks to make sure that the clone bodies of the Emperor still have access to the Force so that he can be immortal. This is very similar to the Dark Empire comics, where shortly after the Thrawn crisis, Palpatine returned in a clone body of himself. Dark Empire is one of the more controversial pieces of the EU, but compared to the mess that was The Rise of Skywalker and the sequel trilogy, it definitely ranks significantly higher. The YouTube channel Spiky Tortoise has actually been doing an animated adaptation of the Dark Empire comics, so you can check that out here if you're interested. It's plausible that there might be a connection here in the Ahsoka show, since we know Thrawn plays a large role and Filoni has already used Mount Tantiss in one of his previous shows. If Filoni is taking inspiration from the Thrawn trilogy, he may use Mount Tantiss and start a new Clone Wars storyline in the Ahsoka show, or possibly later on in his New Republic movie. Expanding on that, it's also possible we could see Omega and Nala Se. The Bad Batch Season 2 finale ended on somewhat of a cliffhanger, but if Mount Tantiss does appear in Ahsoka, we know that Nala Se has been working for the Imperials there, and Omega was captive there the last we saw her. It could also be an opportunity for a reunion between Hera and Omega, since they hit it off as friends in the Bad Batch. Who knows, maybe they'll get Temuera Morrison or an adult Daniel Logan to dress up as a female for the role, though that would definitely look jarring. Omega and Boba Fett would be the same age, so who knows. Another Star Wars Rebels connection that will almost certainly be showing up is Sabine in a lightsaber wielding role. The trailers seem to indicate that Ahsoka is training Sabine either in lightsaber combat or possibly even in the Force. This wouldn't be the first time she's wielded a lightsaber, seeing as she had the Darksaber for several episodes before handing it off to Bo-Katan in Star Wars Rebels, and we all know how that worked out.
What you say?
Who knows, maybe Sabine gets the Darksaber back and becomes the next Tar Vizsla Mandalorian Jedi. Maybe we'll even get a Finn Rao cameo too. It's also rumored that Hera and Kanan's son, Jacen Syndulla, will make an appearance. Personally, I've hated that name since the Rebels finale in 2018. Hijacking the name Jacen when that's clearly the name of Han and Leia's son in the expanded universe is very annoying. It's not that two characters in Star Wars can't have the same first name, but I think it's clearly a misappropriation of EU source material. I would be very annoyed if in Ahsoka or some future New Republic story, if Thrawn or some darkside character like Baylan tries to kidnap Jacen to train him as a darkside apprentice, like was the case with the Solo twins in the expanded universe. Possible spoiler warning for the next topic. A while back, this image of Maul supposedly on the set of Ahsoka was leaked, and in and around the same time, Ray Park, the actor for Darth Maul, posted these images. These could just be leftover images from the set of Solo, and the one with Ahsoka could be a fake. However, let's say just for a moment that they're real. Here's a couple possibilities. One, this takes place sometime after Rebels Season 2 and before Season 4 because, you know,
He dead!
and this scene is some kind of flashback. We still don't know what Ahsoka was up to in between her descent under the Malachor Temple and her return to Lothal, so maybe somewhere in this time Ahsoka had an encounter with Maul. Maul is definitely in Crimson Dawn getup here, so it's possible that this encounter takes place in between their duels on Mandalore and on Malachor while he was still leading Crimson Dawn. This one may be a bit far-fetched, but hear me out. This could be a clone of Maul. We know that in George Lucas's original sequel trilogy story treatments that he planned on having Maul return as a main antagonist, but it would have been a clone of Maul. Given what we just discussed with Mount Tantus, maybe Maul was cloned and he reappears at this point in time. Okay, that's probably not going to happen. My best guess is that this is either a flashback vision, or the pictures are fake and Ray Park is either trolling us with old photos or they're from another project that hasn't been revealed yet. We might also get some additional Night Sister connections in Ahsoka because they've told us that Morgan Elsbeth is a Night Sister. This place has been theorized to be a Night Sister star map that Elsbeth is using to find Thrawn alongside Baylan and Shin. This could connect back to characters like Marin from Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor, and even possibly Dathomir and Maul. It'd also be cool to see Cal Kestis with Ahsoka and Luke, but I think Cal is probably dead by this point. Part of me hopes that they don't really touch the Dathomir stuff too much because I'm a big fan of the EU novel Courtship of Princess Leia, which is largely set on Dathomir and is the first time that the planet and the witches are introduced. Courtship of Princess Leia is set shortly before the Thrawn trilogy and tells the story of Han and Leia's rocky engagement leading up to their marriage, and the witches are one of the best parts of that book. Back when the Clone Wars was on air, their portrayal was actually somewhat controversial. Technically nothing in the Clone Wars Dathomir episodes retconned the book or other Night Sisters material, such as the Infinity's End arc in the Republic comics, but you have to do some off-screen writing to connect the dots, like with most of the Clone Wars controversial changes. Regardless, my general rule of thumb when it comes to any Disney Star Wars is this: if it's well written and easily fits within the EU, I can enjoy it. But if it's poorly written and or disrespectful to the EU, I probably won't enjoy it and will say as much. Regarding Dathomir connections in Ahsoka, my opinion is the same, so we'll just have to wait and see. I can easily accept Elsbeth as a Night Sister who is loyal to Thrawn. What I can't accept is that the characters like Tenennial Joe and Kirana T don't exist somewhere in the galaxy at this time. Back to Thrawn. So far in the Disney canon, Timothy Zahn has written 6 new Star Wars books. His first 3 books form an unofficial trilogy called the Thrawn Empire Trilogy. Zahn certainly doesn't ignore his EU work in these books. In fact, the first few chapters of the first book are a carbon copy of his EU short story Mist Encounter, and in this trilogy he included major EU characters like Chiss Admiral Aralani and Captain Park. Zahn's Empire Trilogy is very closely tied to Star Wars Rebels. The first book ends just before his introduction into the show. Thrawn Alliances takes place in between seasons 3 and 4, and Thrawn Treason takes place in between episodes 10 and 15 of season 4. Another major threat introduced here in the Thrawn Empire Trilogy and expounded upon in the Ascendancy Trilogy is the Grisk, which are a credible threat to the Chiss Ascendancy and Galactic Empire. They are known to enslave their client worlds on their quest of total domination of all sentience. In the Ascendancy Trilogy, Timothy Zahn also ties this in very closely with his EU novel Outbound Flight. Admiral Aralani is with him for much of the novels, and at the start of the trilogy, Thrawn is in trouble with the Chiss for coming dangerously close to taking a preemptive strike with his attack on the Bagari pirates, in which he stole a gravity well projector. He also lost a big ship from lesser space, which is what the Chiss call Republic space, and his brother Thras died as a result of the operation. Though characters like Formby and Cardass don't get referenced, the events of Outbound Flight did take place in the Disney canon. Jumping off of that point, in the novel Outbound Flight, Thrawn makes the claim that he has encountered beings at the fringes of the galaxy that consist of a massive assault force of dark ships, shadowy figures, and weapons of great power based on organic technology of a sort never before seen. They were called the Far Outsiders and had scouting parties seeking information on worlds and peoples to conquer. In the same interview I mentioned before, Zahn also says that he considers the Far Outsiders from Outbound Flight to be the Grisk seen in his recent novels. This is somewhat inconsistent since the Grisk aren't known to use any kind of organic technology, which the Vong used exclusively, making the Far Outsiders described here much more akin to the Yuzong Vong, which is what everyone has assumed the Far Outsiders to be up to this point. Regardless, it seems that Zahn is either giving the Vong a new name from the Chiss perspective or retconning that idea into his current work. He has indicated that he wants to write a Thrawn story that picks up the Grisk story thread that was left open in Thrawn Treason, possibly being set during Ezra and Thrawn's Unknown Regions adventures in between Rebels and Ahsoka. This may be relevant to the Ahsoka show since we'll likely get some information about what happens in this 9-year gap in the show, and the Chiss Ascendancy may appear as part of the Ahsoka show as well. But for now, we can only speculate. Who knows, maybe Filoni will make use of the Grisk or reference them in the show. In Star Wars Rebels and the Thrawn Empire trilogy, Thrawn was also obsessed with the TIE Defender. Defender project, which never really came to fruition under the Empire since Palpatine prioritized the Death Star project over the Defenders. However, given how much Thrawn loves these things, they'll probably be all over the place in Ahsoka. Other relevant source material for the show is the Ahsoka novel. This has its own set of controversy because of Episode 6 of Tales of the Jedi, Resolve, which follows the same basic outline as the 2016 novel Ahsoka. In an interview with Nerdist, Dave Filoni said that the episode was based on the same outline that he had written for the novel, and that the two works essentially told the same story. The general outline was Ahsoka Tano hides in a remote farming community after the rise of the Empire under the alias Ashla. She befriends a human woman around her age who discovers her secret. The community is threatened by an Inquisitor after Ahsoka's secret is revealed, but she quickly defeats her enemy with his own weapon despite being unarmed. She arranges for the evacuation of the community's survivor and agrees to join Bail Organa's rebel movement. However, the novel contains a lot which is missing in the episode. The farm village shown in Tales of the Jedi is noticeably different from Rada, the planet on which most of the novel is set, and the timing of Tano's first post-Order 66 contact with Bail Organa is also irreconcilable with the novel. In the book, Ahsoka and Organa make contact over a year after the formation of the Empire in a reunion where R2-D2 plays a major role. Ahsoka is surprised to hear that Bail Organa is still alive despite being a known Jedi sympathizer, and Organa is shocked to discover that Ahsoka is the person he sent his agents to try to recruit. In the episode, however, Ahsoka and Organa's first contact is during Padme's funeral. The novel's Inquisitor is identified as the sixth brother, but the Inquisitor in the episode has yet to be identified. Ahsoka's voice actress, Ashley Eckstein, stated that the novel did not come into discussion while the episode was in production, and that she never asked Filoni where it fell in relation to the book. Despite noting the connections between the stories, she expressed a great appreciation for the characters of Kaden and Miara Lart, and even noted that she hoped to see them again in future stories. While it's possible these characters could reunite with Ahsoka in the show, I'd say it's unlikely to happen because if Dave Filoni ignored it in Tales of the Jedi, he's likely to ignore anything that happened in that novel for the show or anything else he does. It wouldn't be the first time Filoni ignored printed material in the Disney canon, even if he had a hand in creating it. For instance, in the canon The Last Padawan comic book, the circumstances of his Order 66 survival are wildly different from the portrayal shown in The Bad Batch. While a lot of fans do like Filoni, a lot of fans who invest time and money to keep up with the books and comics have taken issue with the constant retconning of material, something EU fans learned from 2008 to 2012, back when the EU was canon, and Filoni showed disregard for the Clone Wars multimedia project when making the animated show TCW. And for those who have been reading Disney comic books and novels, these inconsistencies have only been made worse by the constant gaslighting by people at Lucasfilm insisting that it's all consistent. Anyways, another thing that might come up here is the reintroduction of Barris Offee. Near the end of Season 5 of the Clone Wars, Barris framed Ahsoka, which led to Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order for good. This event is referenced multiple times in the Ahsoka trailers, and we see what appears to be a surviving female Inquisitor in the trailers as well, one that could very well be a masked Barris. We know that the Empire used former Jedi who had fallen to the dark side as Inquisitors to hunt down surviving Jedi. Barris would make a good candidate assuming she wasn't executed like Ahsoka almost was for the same crime. Given their unresolved history and the presence of an unidentified Inquisitor in the show, it's fully possible that this could be the case. So how does an EU fan feel about this? Well, Barris turning to the dark side and betraying Ahsoka in TCW was one of the top 3 most controversial decisions Dave Filoni made when the EU was still the mainstream canon. In the Medstar duology from the EU, Barris seems like a totally different character than the one we get in the Clone Wars TV show. Not only that, but in the comics, Barris dies during Order 66. This decision in the Clone Wars was totally irreconcilable with the Clone Wars multimedia project. You could maybe make the argument that it doesn't retcon Medstar, since her betrayal would have taken place after, even though her character doesn't really seem all that consistent. But given how seriously the Jedi and Republic handled the possibility of Ahsoka's betrayal, I don't think they would have been more generous with Barris and let her return to Luminara as an apprentice. Regardless, I think it's likely that Barris will show up in Ahsoka, probably as this Inquisitor, but I can only speculate. So, what am I anticipating for the Ahsoka show? I think as its own story, Ahsoka will be an okay show consistent with the other movies and TV shows, and most casual fans will enjoy it. However, as an expanded universe fan, and a fan of several of the Disney canon books and comics, I think it will fall far short of what it could be. As is the case with most things that Disney has mirrored to the EU, the best case scenario is that it's okay, but inferior to the source material it should have been adapted from. Take Solo: A Star Wars Story for instance. It wasn't a terrible movie, but in comparison to the EU EU novels that cover the same ground, the competition isn't even close. Lars Mikkelsen will probably be awesome as Thrawn, of that I have no doubt, but we'll just have to wait and find out if the writing matches the spectacle. Regardless of how good or bad the Ahsoka show is, if you want to watch a faithful adaptation of Heir to the Empire, thankfully there's an awesome filmmaker who's been making an animated adaptation of Heir to the Empire and is in the home stretch on the final chapters. If you want to watch this Heir to the Empire adaptation, in addition to other expanded universe adaptations and official material, I've made this playlist which has every expanded universe movie, show, or short that I know of. On that note, if you haven't heard already, it has recently come to my attention that the highly anticipated Knights of the Old Republic fan film adaptation by Unreal Cinema has been cancelled. It's been a dead man walking for almost 2 years now, but members of the production team recently announced on their Discord that the creator behind the project will not be moving forward with the project. The Malak fan film and the KOTOR Indar Spire trailer are still on their channel and available to view in the EU fan film playlist that I made, but for the time being the project has been cancelled. Speaking of Discord, Star Wars Fan Animations now has one. If you'd like an invite, the link will be in the description and it is also on the About section of my YouTube page. On the Discord, you can share thoughts, ask questions, post memes, and more. The engagement is a bit more personal than the comment section on videos and community posts, and I'm excited to see you all there. In closing, I wanted to cover some updates for this channel's fan film adaptation of Shadows of the Empire. We are very close to releasing the first part of our adaptation. If you don't want to miss this, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want the added convenience of being in the know for any new videos, just click the bell icon so you don't miss a thing. I also wanted to introduce a new collaborator to the project who goes by Admiral Zoda, whose YouTube channel I'll have linked below. Admiral Zoda has been modeling for a fan-made game mod of Galactic Battlegrounds called Expanding Fronts. Admiral Zoda has been generous enough not only to share some of the pre-existing models that he's made, but also to create some new ones that can be of significant use to the Shadows of the Empire fan film. This partnership has already been fruitful, with progress being made on models for Lebo, Gizor Skyhook, Ord Mantell assets, and the loader droid from the Suproza. If you would also like to join the project in any capacity, you can reach out on Discord or email me at starwarsfananimations@gmail.com. Another way you can support the project is on Patreon, which gives you all kinds of exclusive benefits such as early access, digital downloads, voting rights, name and credits, access to 3D printing files such as those for our upcoming playable Dajaric set, and more. Patron support is essential for the purchase of models and software necessary to produce a faithful adaptation at a good quality and to be able to get them out to you as soon as possible. Thank you to all of our current and future patrons for your support. And something I'm dropping today exclusively for patrons of all tiers is the opening crawl I'll be using for Shadows of the Empire. If you want to go ahead and have immediate access, head over to www.patreon.com/StarWarsFanAnimations and become a patron today. I plan to release the crawl publicly here in a few weeks once I have a release date for the first scene from Shadows of the Empire that I'll be releasing. That does it for our Ahsoka pre-show discussion and Shadows of the Empire fan film news update. I'll be doing reviews and analysis for each episode from here on out over the next 7 weeks, so I'll see you all later this week for my review and analysis of episodes 1 and 2.